Saturday Live Lounge, supported by Villa Gaiety.
I do have studio guests with you. I'm going to have a quick word with them now. Fast am I, Elizabeth Davidson Blythe.
Fast am I. How are you doing?
Do you speak any Manx? Kist how?
Bra til you, as Sweden.
Oh, that Tammy Browger in my head. Are you impressed with this, Daniel Quayle?
She can do better than that.
I love that. Manx, but with a slightly American twang. It's a lovely thing. Before we start talking about your new releases, it's not quite an album yet, but there's various singles out there. We were just chatting off air there about everything not trad. Because, you know, people might think, oh, I bet they just listen to all trad music. That's not the case at all, is it, Elizabeth?
No. It was lovely. I always love speaking to people about music that's not trad as well, because by nature of our work, we end up speaking quite a lot about trad music. But I have so many passions for bands that are outside that sort of sphere. So Dire Straits and Bruce Springsteen, and we were having a good chat about Muse as well, which has been a huge influence for us as we've been thinking about this new album. And I know we'll talk about Dire Straits later and everything. But
I love that Muse is an influence to your music. You hear it because one of the songs that we're going to hear, one of the pieces you've put out, does have a real kind of growl to it, which I think that is kind of reflected in that. And Daniel, you like a bit of Muse as well?
Yeah, we went to see Muse last year, didn't we, in Manchester, and that was a phenomenal live show. And it's always interesting seeing what people in other genres do live as well. Yeah. So for me, I listen to loads of live albums just to see how people vary what they do in the studio and live.
Interesting.
Because it can be really interesting how they strip them back or how they build them up. And
so has that informed some of your own approach to performing then?
Yeah, well, up to this point, we've done everything live, including playing synths with feet and all various manner of mad things. And so, yeah, definitely this idea of how do we approach something that we built up really big in the studio and give people a similar feeling live, but not necessarily the same sound exactly.
And that's quite the image, playing synths with your feet. I love that. I take it you've got to take your socks off for that, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice. Please don't do that in the studio. It's only a small room. We'll talk more to Elizabeth and Daniel shortly, and we will also play you some Muse before the hour's out, I promise. I absolutely love her voice. That is Casey Musgraves. It's called Cardinal. So you're listening to the Live Lounge. Christy with you through till 6. I have studio guests. I have Elizabeth Davidson Blythe and Daniel Quayle with me. Now, of course, people who listen to Manx Radio regularly will know Daniel's voice from our Friday Cure This Coosh programme. And we have already done a bit of Manx, which is relevant because it is actually the Coosh Festival at the moment, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. We were lucky enough to be in the White House when there was a bit of a session going on last night to do with it, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was really lovely.
Did you join in?
I didn't have my instrument, but we were happy to participate by enjoying the music.
And I was behind the bar, but I was serving people in Manx.
Very good. I like that. Baviliat beer? What's beer?
Loon. Yeah.
I know a little bit. It's a bit big gilg. Well, it's lovely to have you both with us. And for those because we've played music by you before from the Coast Road, but it'd be really nice, since it's the first time you're with us, to find out a little bit about you. So, I mean, people will have picked up on the fact you have an accent. You're originally from Boston, aren't you? Is that right?
That's very true.
So, yes. I mean, how on earth do you end up being here and also forming this duo with Daniel?
That's a really good question. This isn't something that I talk about very much, which I was thinking about last night, actually. It's been a long process for me. I found Manx music in 2020, and I had basically given up on being a musician at that point. I was studying political science and was with a concentration in law and was planning to go to law school at the time. And I met Cesar Jochen and my now husband in Edinburgh. And they introduced me to bands like Barul and Maclear. And I had played a little bit of Irish and Scottish music. I knew about 5 or 6 tunes. It wasn't very much. But I just absolutely fell in love with the sound of Manx tunes specifically. They actually do have a different feeling. And I became a little bit obsessed, actually. My dad had spent years trying to get me to practice really seriously, and it wasn't until I found Manx music, and I used to just sit in our kitchen and crank me clear and play along to it. And that was all I wanted to do for months and months and months during 2020. That was just my entire life. And I listened to every Manx track I could get my hands on. I went through the entire Culture Vannin website because some amazing person went through and took photos of the archives that are in the Manx Museum of the old tunes and things. And so I went through all of that. I just totally fell in love with the music and the culture, and I started learning the language.
With your 5 a.m. Zoom lessons.
Yeah, they were, because of the time difference. I got up at 5 a.m. every Saturday to go to my Manx lessons from Boston, and I totally love it. And there's no way in the world I would be a musician now had I not found Manx music. And if you had told me in 2020 that I would be lucky enough to get to go around and represent this incredible culture around the world, I would have said, no, you're mad. Like, that's a dream, but absolutely not. So it's really incredible.
That is beautiful. And you're looking at maybe eventually doing a tune book of your own, and you've got sheet music out there, and you've got so much. So, I mean, this really has opened up the world for you musically, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's changed my life. Genuinely, finding Manx music has changed my life completely in every possible way. So I'm incredibly grateful.
Wow, that is quite the thing. What an awesome story. I love that. And, Daniel, it must be, sort of something that's really sort of important for you as well, knowing that, our culture affects people in this way. And I do feel like the Isle of Man can sort of get under your skin, can't it?
Well, I think people tend to not realise how inspirational some of these melodies are. You get very... everyone knows a few of these tunes from when they were at primary school or something. They may have sung them or whatever.
The bell, yeah. Reached, slap.
And you think absolutely nothing of it. And then, like, somebody in Boston is looking at it written down somewhere and going, this is an inspiration. And it's such a strange thing to think about. And then see how wonderful the results have been in tunes that Elizabeth's written, inspired by that tradition and stuff. It is really remarkable. And when we go to other countries and show people these Manx tunes, they really are inspired as well, aren't they?
Yeah, it's so lovely to get to see other people being inspired by them the way that I have been as well. Like, there's nothing better in the world than teaching a Manx tune and then showing up to a session in, say, Estonia or Australia where people are playing Three Little Boats or Craig Willie Sill or something. It's incredible.
Oh, I love that. And the thing now as well, of course, we've been hearing, because I know you spoke to John Barker on the Folk Show as well about your latest release, because we've played the Coast Road before, which is maybe a bit more traditional kind of sound. But now you're sort of developing what you do, and you're sort of bringing the sort of Manx sound of what you do very much into the future and adding a whole different genre, really, in your music, especially with this first single. So tell us a bit about that. How did this all come about?
So, as we mentioned earlier, I listen to a lot of music that is not traditional music necessarily. And I think there was a will in me to want to bring together some sounds that are quite popular in the US as well with my love of Manx music. And so we started talking to Keith Morrison, our wonderful producer, who also has his own band, Face the West, and they're great. But we started talking to him about how we could maybe add some synths and add some of these more pop and rock elements maybe to spice up and sort of, as you say, bring the traditional music into the future. So it's been a process, but yeah.
And it's quite timely as well, isn't it? Because you do find, I think that sort of 80s vibe is quite popular now. And I know McClear have kind of added a little bit of that into what they do as well. So do you feel like does it reach a new audience then, Daniel?
I think what's interesting is we got booked for a load of festivals. And then we started adding the synths in after we'd been booked and didn't tell any of the organisers of the festivals. And we've had no complaints. So that seems like a good sign.
Which is an organiser, they must be thinking, what?
Yeah, they're expecting acoustic, they're expecting the Coast Road. That's what we sent them.
Next thing, you're on stage getting your socks off.
Yeah, that's the one. So, but it's been so well received, and we always see it, I think, as a really positive thing when someone's like, what was that tune? I really want to learn it.
Yeah.
Because our job is to make the melody accessible. If you think of it like a song, the melody is the song. That's the lyrics. That's the bit people are going to sing to themselves or play on their instrument. So the other stuff is all just about making that accessible to an audience. And we've definitely reached people that go, oh, I'm at this folk festival because my wife likes folk music, but I hate it. But I really enjoyed your gig.
Yes.
And that's what we want to hear.
That is what you want to hear. Well, we now want to hear a bit of this new music. So we're going to hear what was been the first single, which is Revival of the Fittest. And I think, is there a bit of, is it Yvonne Solchak in that? Or there's something in this that I recognise, but I can't remember what it is.
Unisachfona.
Oh, Unisachfona, that's it. Yeah, I get confused with the names of things.
Yeah, a good trad Manx tune in there.
Yeah, a good trad tune in here as well. But then is there some original too in here?
So we start out with an Irish tune, Patsy Hanley's, and then go into one of my tunes, The Grave, and then end with a nice banger, Unisachfona.
And just listen to the way this develops, because when you do start adding in all of those other instruments, it does become an entirely different beast. A beautiful beast, I should say. So this is Elizabeth Davidson, Blythe and Daniel Quayle, Revival of the Fittest. just completely freaked out my guests because they're like, yeah, you're going to play in a minute. They've got to get their instruments together and, it's fine. It's fine. If you have just tuned in, we've got Elizabeth Davidson, Blythe and Daniel Quayle with us, and we just heard Revival of the Fittest, which sounded so good. But do you know what? And that is, so this is just a single. The album's still in process, isn't it?
We haven't recorded the album yet, so yeah.
Very much
We keep
so.
on telling people, oh yeah, no, it'll be out in the sort of spring, summertime next year.
Yeah.
And I think people assume we've finished writing and recording it, but we haven't.
Well, I should probably not say this, but I had a phone call with our producer the other day where I told him the timeline that we were thinking about for the album. And I go, does that sound insane? Like, is that absolutely crazy? And he goes, let's just do it because otherwise we'll get too scared.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to. You've just got to go with it, haven't you? It's the creative process. It just happens. So they're getting their instruments together in the background. So Daniel's going to be playing guitar. We've got Elizabeth playing fiddle as well. And they're going to play a set now. What are we going to hear? What are we going to hear from you guys?
We're going to hear an oldie but a goodie. We're going to play Daybreak for you.
Fantastic. Live in the studio. I love having live music, but I especially love when we have trad musicians in here because there's just such a great energy about it. Well, I'm just going to say what I always say. Take it away, guys. Sanctuary, and that is why they play all over the world. That was superb. Gurumai Moru. I'm going to let you catch your breath. So what I'm going to do is play some Muse for you. As per request, here's Feeling Good. More from the guys after this.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I am so glad that was the choice of my studio guests, Elizabeth Davidson Blythe and Daniel Quayle, who we just heard from live in the studio. And I said, energy. You brought the energy. That was so good. And we didn't even chat about the fact that just before you played live, we heard Revival of the Fittest, which is, as we're saying, a bit of a departure from what people would normally know you for, which is slightly more traditional trad, if that makes sense at all. You're kind of bringing it into the future and adding new instruments. Daniel just showed me a photo of how you bring these new instruments. You mentioned you now go out with a synthesizer. I mean, it's more like a footplate. What you just showed me a photo. Just describe what you just showed me.
Yeah, so there's a few different pads on there that you control with your feet and the angle of your feet and various things. It's very Jean-Michel Jarre sort of. You know, the what is it, the laser harp and things like that.
That's what you need now. You need lasers coming out of you somehow.
Yeah, but it's a lot of focus.
Yeah. So you're playing the guitar, and we're talking trad, which is difficult in itself because the speed and the rhythm that you have to keep up is so tough. And operating this with your feet at the same time. Yeah,
but then when we're at home, Elizabeth's writing the tunes while playing that with her feet.
So she's use this thing as well?
I use it to compose sometimes, but it is really impressive to watch Daniel do this live during a gig, because I get to sit there and play my fiddle and watch him sort of do his thing, and it's amazing.
It is fascinating how it's sort of become part of the way that I'm playing the instrument. So if I make a mistake with my feet, I will make the same mistake with my hands. If I make a mistake with my hands, I'll make the same mistake with my feet, because it's just part of how the instrument works now. It's very odd.
It's like the patting your head, rubbing your belly thing, isn't it? Well, interesting. We were also talking off air there about, we said earlier about how, Elizabeth, you've completely immersed yourself in Manx culture and music. And you were just telling me things off air that I had no idea to do with Manx music and the way it's sort of formed and why it does reach people and touch people in quite the way it does. And you had this idea, didn't you, of wanting to blend some of this sort of new sound and some of the old sound as well of different genres into what you're doing, but using fellow musicians from the Isle of Man. And that's where we're coming to the next piece of music we're going to hear, because you contacted one Davy Knowles for this, didn't you? Tell us how all this came about and what you were wanting to achieve with this single.
So I think I first discovered Davy quite late in the game, when we were in Australia most recently. And I think you played some of his music for me, and I didn't even know what it was. You just put it on in the car, and I said, I want that on our album for this track, because I composed this tune originally, and I had in mind that I wanted an electric guitar on it. I had been listening a lot to the Dire Straits track Brothers in Arms, and it's one of my absolute favorites, and I really wanted that feel. You played me Davy's music, and I became obsessed. And then I ended up emailing him. Well, we ran into him at the Villa Cafe, actually, to be completely honest.
Good timing.
I've not told anyone about this yet, really. But
did you accost him over a cappuccino?
I really did. I pretended to be in line for.
Come on.
It's worse than that. I pretended to be in line for a cup of coffee, so that when he turned around from buying his cup of coffee, I could be like, "Oh, hey. Are you Davy?" So he doesn't even know this. This is embarrassing. But I did accost him at the Villa Cafe, truly, and said, "I really love your music." I explained who we were. Said, "We're working on this track. Could I send you?" And just so that you could have a listen, just to see.
Yeah.
And he said, absolutely. And he's been the most generous with his time and his energy and his support and
his social media presence.
Yeah. He's got 1 or 2 followers, hasn't he? So he's quite useful in that respect. And it does. I mean, I listened to the track in the background when he released it the other week, and it came out, and I was listening to it thinking, it's very brothers in arms, which is obviously exactly what you're going for, and it really is. And it's such a beautiful kind of full circle moment, because you've got Davy from the Isle of Man, who has himself dabbled a little bit in trad. He learnt Drinking Dragon, I think it was. He learnt to play on mandolin, or so he wrote Drinking Dragon, I think it was.
Okay.
It was a trad tune on mandolin, and did a little bit for his documentary Island Bound, kind of tracing, traditional music across to America. And now he's in America playing more American music, and yet here you are from Boston, playing.
You swapped places.
Yes, playing Manx music, and the two
Yes.
have combined on this track, which is a beautiful thing. And it's called Ursa Major. Why is it Ursa Major?
It actually came from a memory of just the peacefulness of when you're being still in the world, which is not a common thing these days. And I talk about this at gigs sometimes, because we have a world that is constantly bombarding us with images and sounds, and it came from this memory of being still and just looking at the stars. And I think it's something mundane that a lot of us do, but that is actually becoming more and more important that we do. And I wrote this tune really thinking about that stillness that you can get if you're out late at night, especially somewhere like the Isle of Man, to be honest. And on a clear night, you can just look up and see this entire, other worlds above you. And it's the most lovely sense of stillness. And I was just thinking about that. So.
Well, it really does convey that. It's a beautiful track. So we're going to hear Ursa Major now. You have just announced you've got at least one date for next year, and then you're going to be adding more dates, aren't you?
Yes, so we're playing, well,
Yeah,
I'll let you say.
We'll be at the Shetland Folk Festival 1st to the 4th of May next year, alongside Meclia as well. They'll also be there, so good Manx reprepresentation there.
And how lovely, again, that's come full circle as well from you listening to Mick Lear
tell
back
me
in the
about
day.
it. Oh my gosh.
We've got lots of stuff that we're not allowed to talk about yet, but
You're very
it's gonna
important now, Daniel. I mean, look at you with your international presence. I mean, I'm lucky to have you in the studio. What about gigging over here? Have you got any plans to do something over here?
Yes, we do. Various things coming up. Again,
That you
not
can't say yet.
finalised,
Yeah.
and we don't want to tell people, oh, this thing is happening, and then for plans to change. I just hate it when I hear that something's happening, and then it doesn't
It's all right,
materialise.
you can keep us posted. It's
Yeah,
fine.
we will,
You can
we
just
will.
keep us posted.
We've got your email address.
Yeah,
studio@manxradio.com.
Same one for you, in fact. Well, listen, why don't you... I'm going to let you, Elizabeth, introduce this piece of music, and then we will say, Guramayu, many thanks for being in the studio. What are we going to hear now?
Ursa Major by the two of us, Elizabeth Davidson, Blythe and Daniel Quayle, featuring the incredible Davy Knowles.
Thank you. It is beautiful, and you can totally see what they were going for, and they achieved it. It is Ursa Major, so that's Elizabeth, Davidson, Blythe and Daniel Quayle featuring Davy Knowles. What a beautiful full circle moment.
Saturday Live Lounge, supported by Villa Gaiety. Keep up to date with the island's premier entertainment venue by following us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.